What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. And today we are actually doing a cool mod on the TRX, and I'm very excited about this thing. And what we've got here on the toolbox today is a very cool part from Shifts and Grins Fabrication. And what it is this very unassuming bracket. But what this bracket does is very cool. Let me take you to the back of the truck and show you where this is going to go. So on the back of the TRX, we've obviously got our dual tow hooks and our exhaust back here. But one thing we don't have a lot of is rear lighting. Yes, we have our brake lights and our normal reverse lights, but we don't have a lot of bright light. And if you are out on the trail or even just backing up, it would be cool to have some rear auxiliary lighting. And now I've seen some guys cut holes in the bumpers or mount some lights that hang down, below the bumper area. But the issue is, if you're actually going to be using this thing off-road, any lighting that's hanging down below, or if you're drilling and mounting it below the bumper or wherever, you're going to be causing some ground clearance issues. Now, Shifts and Grins Fabrication, like I said, has this awesome bracket. So now that we're under the truck, I can show you the solution that Shifts and Grins Fabrication has come up with, and that is this really cool bracket which bolts to the existing tow hook bolts and has everything tucked up really nice and out of the way. Now, Shifts and Grins does offer a bare bracket just like this. It comes obviously as a set of two, or you can purchase the bracket with the lights. And there are a couple of different options on the lightings, but they're from Diode Dynamics, and they are a very nice quality feeling light. They are a very nice aluminum body with a heat sink and a weather pack seal. It's just a very nice quality feeling light. Obviously, the light itself comes with the brackets, mounting hardware, and everything you need. Now, onto the wiring, there are a couple of different options. This is just the Diode Dynamics universal backup wiring harness kit here that has a really actually nice quality harness with really nice abrasion conduit on the whole thing, again with those weather pack seals on the end, relayed, switched, everything there. Now, Shifts and Grins Fabrication does offer a plug and play harness that I believe is going to plug into the rear trailer wiring. Obviously, the front will still be open and you'll be able to plug your trailer in, but this will just plug in line of the rear. But what I've got here is just the, again, Diode Dynamics universal backup wiring harness. And it looks like a big, huge hot mess here wadded up on the toolbox, but it is honestly a very nice setup. Now, the universal harness is going to give me a couple different options on how I want to hook this thing up. If I wanted, I could just tie into the rear reverse light wire at the trailer tow harness if I just wanted them to come on anytime the reverse lights do. And another really cool thing about these lights is that they do have a small red LED in them also. So there is another circuit you can power to have both of those on a red light. You could have them as a brake light, you could have them as a running light. So there's a lot of options here, guys. It's kind of cool that you can configure it how you want it. But what I'm going to do on these lights is have the auxiliary switch for the white light. But then the red light, I think I'm going to wire that to my rear parking lights or the parking running lights, whatever you want to call them. So whenever the truck's lights are on, those dimmer red lights will be on these. So it'll just be a cool whole light show there in the back of the truck with the TRX with our three running lights under the tailgate. So first things first, let's get these brackets installed, and then we will get the lights on, and then we will start the process of getting the wiring strung on this truck. So the brackets are super easy to install. We are just going to pull out these two 21mm bolts here on the rear tow hook. And then you'll hold your bracket up into place with the small bend kind of facing downward. And then last but not least, I am going to torque these things. They torque to 111 foot-pounds. Since this thing is a tow hook and this truck has been stuck before, I definitely want these torqued. Now, fit and finish on the brackets. They are cut perfectly to kind of mirror the tow hooks, which is really awesome. And honestly, the powder coat is almost 100% perfect to the factory tow hooks, which I love when aftermarket brackets or fasteners are the same material or finish as the factory stuff next to it. It just kind of blends in and looks like it was always supposed to be there. Another kind of cool thing, which I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but his logo is cut just where this bracket would normally catch a bunch of dirt and sand. If this was solid and not laser cut out, there would be dirt and sand collecting and just sitting up here and nasty. It is cut out that is going to drain any dirt, debris, sand, whatever you may catch up there is going to come right out, which is kind of a cool added benefit. So now that we've got our bracket installed, we can go ahead and get our lights put together, which is just bolting the bracket onto the base of the light. And now that we've got the light all put together, we'll be able to get it tucked into the tow hook area and get our washer, lock washer, and the nut installed. And now that we've got the light installed, you can see what a cool, awesome bracket or location this thing is. That light is very, very visible from the rear, but it is fully caged or protected in the tow hook. Even if you were to jump and bottom the truck out, that light is no lower than the bottom of the tow hook, so you'd be doing massive damage to the truck long before you ever touch that light. And again, another cool thing is the fact that that rear tow hook is still super open. You could get a D-ring through here, you could get a strap or a hook or whatever you're using completely through this tow hook without even touching the light. So again, guys, there is kind of the finished final product with the light bolted on to the bracket. And again, this bracket would absolutely match the truck's powder coat if your truck is clean. This thing is, yeah, it's been out in the sand a little bit. But there is that light tucked up out of harm's way, up above the tow hook, but yet that tow hook is still very, very usable. I don't know. That's an awesome bracket. So now that you've got the rear light brackets and the lights bolted to them, it's time to run the wiring harness. Now, again, this is where the install is going to kind of be different depending on which wiring harness you go with. Like I said, I am using the universal diode dynamics harness, which is, again, a universal harness. It is going to go from the front of the vehicle up in the engine bay, down the frame rail, all the way back to those rear lights. And then up at the front, I'm going to have a ground wire and then a power wire, which I'm going to hook up to one of the auxiliary switch wires. Now, clear at the other end of the wiring harness, I obviously have the two plugs, which go to the two lights in the rear. And then I have a secondary small plug with two wires on it, which this harness goes into, and this is where we talked about that red light. Now again, there's going to be a lot of different configurations you could do, but what I am going to be doing is powering the blue wire, at least again on this universal diode dynamics harness, with the back of the trailer tow harness for the running lights. So when the running lights or headlights are on, the red glow is going to be on those, so it'll just look like part of the parking lights or running lights. So it'll honestly look pretty cool. But again, there are multiple ways you could wire this. You'll just kind of have to play with it and decide what you want to do. Again, his plug and play harness, I believe, is going to be pretty cool. Also, I think it will just come on with the reverse lights, and it'll be cool too. And we'll kind of look at where that plugs in under the truck. But for me, I am going to start running this wiring harness all the way back under the truck. And this is where you can kind of make or break your install. Really take a lot of time running your harness, making sure it's out of the way of anything hot, anything on the exhaust. I've seen a lot of things come into work you know, Jeep related or what have you, that the wiring is just poorly ran. It looks really bad. So do yourself a favor, take a lot of time, try and find a factory wiring harness that kind of follows the frame rail, and just use like 100 zip ties. You know, zip tie this thing as much as possible and follow a factory harness all the way to the back of the truck. Get it tucked up high. Just make sure it's out of the way of anything moving, hot, whatever. You just want it to look nice under the truck. Now again, this is going to be kind of hard to show, but I am going to start running my harness kind of back down behind the battery, which ends up with the harness kind of running behind the plastic wheel well. And then we'll end up kind of just running all the way down the frame. And I'll kind of do my best to kind of show you guys where I've got that harness ran. But again, it's just going to be using your best judgment, making sure that harness is kind of tucked up high and out of the way. But again, take your time here, make sure you really run it well. There's no just one way to do it. There's going to be multiple different paths you could route your wiring. So no, it's not just a one thing and done. Just take your time and try and run that wiring as best as possible. So guys, quick little wiring harness update here. I am, again, still working on running my wiring all the way to the back. Now I'm gonna just kind of get it installed and then show you guys kind of an overview of where I've got it roughly routed. Otherwise we'd have like a 5-hour long video of me fiddling with getting the wiring ran. But one thing I really wanted to do up here in the engine bay was have it tucked behind the battery box. So as you can see, I've got my wiring that's going to need to be up here where the auxiliary switch wiring is, routed behind the battery box, and then it comes out here at the back, because otherwise you've just got wiring laying over stuff. It just doesn't look very nice. So how I got it back there was take the 13mm bolts that are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there was a large push clip here at the very front. Once those bolts and that clip were removed, I was able to just kind of flex the battery box up and out of the way enough that I could kind of get the harness tucked, obviously under the bar here, and then the front one was super tight. So I just kind of used a glove so I wouldn't scratch the paint and a trim tool and just kind of worked and pried upward on that front battery box piece. And again, I only needed just a teeny little gap to get the wiring passed under there, and then that thing will look almost factory with the wiring tucked with all of the other wiring behind the battery box. And then again, we'll start shooting down the firewall to the frame rail. All right, so I've got the wiring roughly routed. I'll try my best to kind of take you guys underneath and show you where we've got this thing ran all the way down the truck. There is a big main wiring harness running down the driver's side frame rail, and I just tried my best to kind of tuck the harness up and over brackets and frame pieces to match where that factory harness is going. So again, up here in the front, this is the front half of the wiring harness. And like I said, I unbolted that battery box or tray enough to get these pried up to get the wiring ran behind it, because there is a big main harness back there. I then go directly down behind the battery in front of the firewall, which kind of takes me down into this inner fender area. And now we are under the truck looking back forward up there kind of near that fender area. And again, right up here is where that wiring harness comes down in between the inner fender and the actual metal structure of the body. I was just able to kind of tuck my hand up there and push the wiring down, pull the wiring, which led me to the next section, that there is a large metal bracket that the wiring harness then tucks up and over. So again, I just tried to mirror everything as close as possible. And then looking down towards the back of the truck, here again, you can see that main wiring harness that runs all the way down the frame rail. And again, guys, I just have the wiring loosely ran right now. I will be adding a million zip ties to get the rear backup light wiring harness as tightly to this factory harness as I possibly can. As we're working our way down the truck, the story just continues. I am following this main wiring harness as close as I possibly can. Right here, that harness is tucking up over the frame, and again, I did the exact same thing. So back here, kind of where a body mount is up underneath, that's where it got kind of tricky because the harness jumps up over the frame rail as we're working our way back towards the shocks. And up here in the kind of rear area, just in front of the rear shocks, that was definitely the toughest area to match that factory harness because that wiring harness is kind of tucked on the other side of all these brackets. So it was just a lot of fishing my hand on the front and back of these brackets, kind of passing that wiring through. And now we are behind the rear axle here. And again, that harness kind of goes up on top of the fuel tank and then starts cutting back across the frame rail. And then as we turn and work our way backwards, that wiring harness goes on the outside, up near our rear shock reservoir, up and over a bracket, and then finally turns and goes to the rear bumper. And once we're up here in the rear bumper, obviously we've got a harness we can follow across and plug into both of our rear auxiliary lights. And then up here is our trailer tow connector. There is just one tab that you push here on the side, and then you can unplug the connector. And again, this is where some of the installation is going to be a little different depending on if you've got the plug and play harness that just goes in line up here, or if you're like me with the universal that is just going to be splicing in to one of these trailer tow wiring harness connector wires. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of zip tie everything nice and firm where it's supposed to be. I'm obviously not going to show you guys the hour-long process of putting 100 zip ties on this thing, but again, we are just trying to follow that main wiring harness from the front all the way to the back of the truck, zip tie it along the way, make it as nice and pretty as you can, and then we'll work on the wiring in the rear and then the final wiring under the hood. Now that we've got all of the wiring ran and I've got like 100 zip ties from head to tail, again, zip tying it as tightly as I could to the factory harness, we are left with finishing the wiring in the back and finishing the wiring up here in the front. So I'm going to start in the front. Now, if you haven't ever looked under the hood of your TRX, next to the fuse box way down here is going to be a big, huge wad of pink wiring that looks like this. Now, it's going to be all electrical taped together and electrical taped to a wiring harness. It's kind of a pain to get out. You've got to just kind of break the electrical tape, and then you can pull this big, huge wad of pink wiring. Now, what the pink wiring is all of our auxiliary switch wiring. This is the power wire for our auxiliary switches. We have 6 wires here since we have 6 auxiliary switches, and each one of them is one of our switches. So this is our power. We have a bunch of ground studs here on the side that we can, attach our ground studs or terminals to. But one thing you're going to want to try to be careful, this is a little diagram that is taped around the auxiliary switch wiring, and it tells you what each and every wire does. Auxiliary switch 1 is a pink with a dark blue line, auxiliary switch 2 is a pink with dark green line, and so forth. So that is definitely a good thing to try to keep, throw it in the glove box, at least hang on to it so you know what all the switches are. So since I am very boring and don't have anything wired to my auxiliary switches, I'm just going to use auxiliary switch 1 for now, which is the pink with dark blue. So I've got it separate from the others. I'm going to kind of wad up the remaining 5 and again, kind of just tuck it down in the harness there. So since this is that universal wiring harness that we talked about, I've got a lot going on. This thing, has a power and a ground, a fuse, a relay, another connector that would hook up to this switch that would be ran inside the vehicle. But since we have auxiliary switches and I really want to kind of minimalize a lot of this wiring under the hood, I believe I'm going to be able to eliminate like 90% of this and basically just use the wiring harness that is coming up from the back. Because in this harness, I've got a yellow, black, and red wire. Now the black wires obviously are ground. The red wire is going to be power for our normal white lights. And then yellow is one of the wires that is also a open wire there at the very back. There's another connector that has a blue wire which can activate those red lights, which again, we're going to hook up to the trailer tow harness. So when I put the running lights on, those little red lights light up. So this yellow wire is just going to be hanging out up here. There's no power, no nothing on it. It's just a loose wire, but again, it's gonna be fine. And at least I can eliminate all of this relay, the fuse, and all of that. And again, I can eliminate the fuse since all of our auxiliary switches are fused already in the fuse box, so I'm not unsafe getting rid of this. So for the ground, I would love to have a new crimp on terminal end, but I was very unprepared. So I just grabbed the end off of the other side of that harness that we just cut off. I will solder these two together. Then we will have our ground, our power. We're obviously going to hook up to the auxiliary switch 1. And then again, we'll just have the yellow wire hanging out up here. So now that I've got the pink wire ran to the power wire, all I need to do is add our ground wire to one of our ground studs over here on the side. So now that we've got underhood done, the wiring done, the brackets on, the lights done, we just have one more thing to do at the very back. Now, again, there's multiple different options you could do because this has a red LED in that rear fog or light assembly. So you could wire it up to a brake light, you could wire it up to a running light. What I'm gonna do is wire it up to my park lights or running lights, whatever you wanna call them. The lights that are on when you turn your headlights on, because the red light is a dimmer light. I don't think it's a terribly bright brake light, blindingly bright light. So I'm just gonna have it on with my running lights. Now, how I'm going to do that is splice into the wiring that goes into the trailer tow wiring connector. Now here I've got a breakdown, I guess, of the trailer tow wiring connector and then all of the different wiring, the color, and what they do. So since I am wanting to hook it up to the park light, I am going to need to hook it up to the brown wire. So this is another little connector that I cut off of the large original harness. And the small blue wire here is going to hook up to the brown wire back at my trailer tow harness. And then when that blue wire gets power, the red lights will turn on the new rear lights. So guys, back under the truck here is that rear trailer tow harness. We will just kind of need to get the tape peeled back so we can see the wiring inside. And again, I'm just going to grab the brown wire, strip a little bit of the insulation, solder on the blue wire, and then it will just plug into my new harness here at the back. Well guys, I am finally finished up. Honestly, I've been out here for about 3 hours now. Filming always adds a lot more time than if you're just doing it in real life, doing it yourself. But like I said, I've been out here about 3 hours, and gosh, most of it was running that wiring. It is kind of the tedious process of it, obviously, trying to run it and tuck it, and you're fishing your hands up and through the frame, and it took a lot of time. And then to go back through, take up all the slack, and you know, zip tie. I used a lot of zip ties, but the more time you take doing that, the better the outcome's gonna be on fit and finish and everything looking good. But we're all wired up. Let's see what it looks like now. So when I turn my park lights on, I now not only have the normal lights, but I've got the two red LEDs lit up in those auxiliary lighting. And man, it is just the perfect color. It's the exact same color, same intensity as all of the current running lights. I don't know, to me that looks pretty freaking cool, just having everything lit up. Let me go turn the garage lights off so we get the full effect. All right, so there is kind of at least most of the lights off here in the garage. And yeah, that is what we're left with it being wired to the running lights. And again, they are just almost identical intensity to the running lights, our center running lights. I don't know, it's a cool look. But what we are all wanting to see is the white lights. So how I've got mine wired up, we will turn the key on, and then we are going to reach over and hit auxiliary 1. And yeah, it is very bright. I am definitely looking forward to these things. If nothing else, hooking up to the trailer at night, this is gonna be an absolute game changer in the dark, hitching up to the trailer. But think about even other things, you know, out on the trails or just literally anything, these things would come in handy. So I am super excited to have these things on the truck. Now I'll probably try to throw in a little daylight clip just so you guys can see kind of in the daylight what it looks like, you know, looking at the back of the truck, just so you can see how those lights and those brackets look and fit in the daylight, since it's obviously very late out here now. All right guys, so here I am kind of sitting on the street, and we will throw the truck into reverse. And yeah, those are the normal lights. And honestly, it is relatively dark, even though it doesn't look like it. But for comparison, here is just factory reverse lights. And then we'll kick on our rear auxiliary lighting. Yeah, that's gonna illuminate a lot more. And now I haven't even really adjusted any angle. I just bolted them on how I thought they kind of needed to be. So yeah, that's some insane lighting going on back there now, compared to currently the reverse lights are on. You just can't tell because they're doing nothing. But now with those shifts and grins, auxiliary lighting brackets, and their lights, yeah, that's gonna be amazing for hooking up to the trailer, for off-road, for literally anything. And guys, here I am hooking up to my trailer, and again, it doesn't look dark, but it is, so I don't know why the GoPro's picking up so much light, but still, here I am hooking up to the trailer, and those lights are an absolute game changer here, and definitely in the pitch black. That is awesome. So guys, I hope this video hasn't become too outrageously long like all of my install videos seem to do, but I've got to give a massive shout out to Shifts and Grins Fabrication. They're the ones making this cool bracket. What a cool design being tucked up in that tow hook. I don't know, that's a cool thing. I wished I had thought of it, but I didn't, and that's why we're getting them from Shifts and Grins Fabrication. So I don't know. Get one ordered up for your truck, pick your lighting, pick your harness. honestly, it's a super easy install. The lights, obviously, and the brackets are the easiest. The wiring, it's gonna take a little time in the garage on your back, rolling around. But man, it's a super nice harness. It's a super nice kit. I'm pumped about it. And it's one of those things that, to me at least, doesn't look absolutely aftermarket. You know, I'm relatively OEM plus, if you will. I don't have a whole lot of stuff that just looks blatantly aftermarket, big huge light bars or anything like that, but stuff like this that just looks factory or looks like it could have come from the factory, man, I dig on that stuff. It's super cool, and this just is exactly that. Factory looking, factory fit and finish, and more lights are always cool. So guys, head on over to shiftsandgrinsfabrication.com. Get your brackets ordered, get your lights ordered, whatever you want to do, just get it ordered. He also has really cool front hood A-pillar mount brackets for TRXs and 5th gen Rams. I'm assuming they would fit. So I don't know, he's got some really cool stuff. Head on over there, get your own, get it wired up, and make some more light happen. So guys, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.